I call the meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 69 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Fisheries and Oceans. This meeting, of course, is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to House Order of June 23rd, 2022. We will begin today's meeting in public to hear witness testimony. Afterwards, we will switch to in-camera for the second hour. A reminder to all, please address your comments through the chair. Screenshots or taking photos of your screen is not permitted. In accordance with the committee's routine motion concerning connection tests for witnesses, I am informing the committee that all witnesses have completed the required connection tests in advance of the meeting. So for 3:30 to 4:30, we're resuming our study of foreign ownership. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and a motion adopted on January 20, 2022, the committee is resuming its study of foreign ownership and corporate concentration of fishing licences and quota. I would like to welcome our panel of witnesses. Appearing as an individual, we have Mr. Christensen, Professor, representing Aero Trading Company Limited. We have Brad Moreau, President and Chief Executive Officer by video conference. And representing Skipper Otto Community Supported Fishery, we have Ms. Strobel, Co-Founder and Chief Executive Officer. Thank you for taking the time to appear today. You will each have now up to 5 minutes for your opening statement. We'll start with Mr. Christensen, please.
Mr. Chair, members, thank you for the opportunity to address the committee. I'm a Canadian citizen born in Denmark, where I worked a decade for the Danish DFO. I spent 10 years with an international research organization, followed by 20 as a professor at UBC. I'm a fellow of the Royal Society of Canada, specialized in ecosystem-based management, notably on the combination of ecological, social, and economic trade-offs that so often are your headache in FOPO. I have witnessed the result of a flawed objective for fisheries, maximizing economic yield, that fisheries should be managed to maximize profit. DFO has on the West Coast adopted such a policy to make fisheries efficient, leading to easier to manage big-scale fleets to the detriment of local communities. In parallel, management has moved towards individual vessel quotas, which in the name of efficiency often are made tradable. And in BC, they are unusual in an almost complete absence of ownership restrictions. The BC halibut fishery has been called a poster child for successful management. But my then PhD student Daniel Edwards documented how processors now control the quota market through leasing, how harvesters now own less than 15% of the quota. The quota system has enabled investors and corporations to buy more quota, instead of harvesters building new boats, providing livelihood. The system leads to corporate concentration and vertical integration, and the price is paid by new generations entering the fishery and by their communities. Many who fish have no choice but to lease quota from a processor, which ties them to selling to that processor at the price offered. Harvesters cannot earn from the fishery to reinvest and maintain their boats, and earnings do not offer a path to quota ownership, nor for crew to boat ownership. Despite clear socioeconomic objectives for fisheries in Canada, there's an almost complete lack of consideration for socioeconomic objectives in West Coast fisheries. I blame DFO, full stop, not just for the mistakes of the 1990s, but even more for continuing down that road. The move from owner-operator to corporate dominance has been devastating for fishing communities. Owner-operator fisheries provide livelihood, not just for those on board, but for the service industry in coastal communities. It's been argued that seasonal income from fisheries is too low to provide livelihood. But such income is crucial for maintaining coastal communities where people often have a portfolio of income and do not rely on high income from any one seasonal fishery. Community-based fisheries serves as magnets for tourism, providing local seafood, jobs, and livelihood. That is not considered with policies to make fisheries efficient. Value does not come from exporting raw products or products that can compete with low-cost import, but from value-added processing and marketing. Local value chains provide jobs and income. It really is value-added. Rural coastal communities are dying throughout BC, and that notably includes First Nations losing livelihood and traditional knowledge about fishing. We need to consider fisheries a strategic asset if our rural coastal communities are to survive. What needs to be done is clear. FOPO pointed the way 4 years ago in the West Coast Fisheries report. Make the owner-operator principle where only active, independent harvesters are allowed to own licenses and quota a requirement on the West Coast, just like on the East Coast. It's time to righten the ship. Thank you.
Thank you. That was almost dead on the time. So we'll now go to Ms. Strobel for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to members of the committee for inviting my testimony today. My name is Sonia Strobel, and I bring a few different perspectives to this study into the impacts of foreign ownership and corporate concentration of fishing licenses and quotas, and I'll try to focus my remarks in areas that haven't been covered by other witnesses already. So the first perspective I bring is as a fishing family. I married into the fisheries in BC over 20 years ago and have witnessed the same struggles that you've heard from other harvesters. We couldn't afford to buy the licenses in our family, and so now every year my husband leases. And he faces the same uncertainty as thousands of other harvesters who lease licenses. For many, leased licenses come with conditions around whom they must sell to and for what price. They take on the lion's share of the risk setting up for the season, and yet they have no agency over the market for their catch. Fishing is inherently uncertain, but disproportionately so for small-scale independent harvesters in BC. Uncertainty around whether or not you'll even be able to fish is something that our friends and colleagues on the East Coast inshore fleet never even have to think about. As you've heard from other witnesses, this is in no small part because of the extent of corporate concentration of licenses designed to control both access to the resource and the price. Some will say that the DFO's beneficial ownership survey will provide evidence that there are no monopolies in fishing in Canada. And the survey may indeed make it appear that way. But be careful what conclusions you draw, because the survey is studying the wrong thing. The reality is more nuanced than just who owns a license or quota on paper. Corporations don't have to own all the quota to control it, and I can provide a general example of this if we have time during questions. Anyone working with the industry knows this, but will be cautious about speaking publicly about it for fear of repercussions. The point is that in BC, even many of the few remaining owner-operators aren't independent. They can't sell their catch to the highest bidder, and they have no agency over their enterprises. My second perspective is as a seafood consumer. Before marrying into a fishing family, I rarely ate seafood because it was next to impossible to get local seafood in my coastal community of Vancouver, even though I was watching the offload of some of the most abundant, well-managed seafood in some of the cleanest water in the world. I later found out that in Canada we export about 90% of what we catch, and at the same time about 80% of the seafood Canadians consume is imported. The pandemic and subsequent supply chain shocks laid bare just how vulnerable our food system is. It's a simple fact that the average Canadian can scarcely access Canadian seafood, and the seafood they can buy often comes from fisheries with far worse environmental and human rights track records than Canadian seafood. And concentration of licenses and quotas into fewer and fewer export-oriented hands is a big part of the problem. Thirdly, my perspective is as a small business owner. My husband and I started Skipper Auto Community-Supported Fishery in 2008 to de-risk fishing for fishing families and to provide direct access to Canadian seafood for Canadians. Since then, we've grown from supplying the fish from one family, my father-in-law Otto, to 45 fishing families in BC and Nunavut, and to providing their catch directly to over 8,000 home cooks across the country, from Victoria to Ottawa. There is significant growing demand from both the supply side and the demand side of our business. Because of our lean direct-to-consumer model, we pay fishing families more than they can get anywhere else. As a result, we have more demand from harvesters than we can meet. And because we provide the most fisher direct, transparent seafood in Canada, there's huge demand from consumers across the country as well. Ultimately, what this whole issue of foreign ownership and corporate consolidation comes down to is that the Government of Canada has privatized access to the commons. And there's a good reason why we don't privatize, for example, our national parks. They're a common resource for all Canadians. And sure, big companies could make a fine go of providing services in parks and charging admission, but we don't go for that, because it wouldn't equally benefit all Canadians. Foreign ownership and corporate concentration of licenses and quotas privatizes the commons. It takes away the power of the boots-on-the-deck fishing families. And it de-risks an inherently risky industry for the big players while placing the risk squarely on the shoulders of the little guy. If we care about retaining the social, cultural, and economic benefits of the fisheries in our Indigenous, rural, and coastal fishing communities, then the Government of Canada must tackle foreign ownership and corporate consolidation alongside a made-in-BC fleet separation and owner-operator policy. So thank you for your time, Mr. Chair, and to the members, and I'll be pleased to answer questions.
Thank you again, just under the time, so that's first time yet. Mr. Moreau, for 5 minutes or less, please. You're on mute.
Sorry about that. Thank you for allowing me to speak today on foreign ownership and corporate concentration. My name is Brad Miro. I'm the president and CEO of Arrow Trading, a fish processing company in BC that was established in 1978. We have a plant in Vancouver and one on the north coast near Prince Rupert. I appreciate to speak on this because we are a Canadian company that happens to be foreign owned, and we also happen to own multiple fishing licenses and quotas. I operate primarily within the small and medium-sized fishing fleets, and to give you some idea of the size of our company, we have dealings with as many as 300 independent Canadian fishermen in any given year. Over my 35-year career doing this, I've developed a level of expertise, I feel, in licensing and quota transactions that have allowed me to help or advise individual fishermen and First Nations organizations, as well as some of the industry advisory bodies. I've seen the industry change immensely over these decades, and I should point out that there are very few remaining processing facilities on the BC coast, and that many over the last 3 or 4 decades have ultimately failed or been consolidated into other existing companies. In Prince Rupert, for example, Arrow Trading, well, we're in Port Edward, but we're the only remaining full-fledged fish processing facility that's left. Other people just operate offloading facilities. We own a variety of licenses and quotas that I feel are integral to us being able to maintain the operation of our processing plants year-round. We've made these necessary investments, not just in licenses, but in equipment. And I've also always provided financial assistance to some of our fishermen in order for them to be able to buy licenses or upgrade their vessels, as traditional banking arrangements are not always available to them. The license bank that we have created, as it's called, or a license pool, benefits all of my stakeholders, including fishermen. And I think it's a sustainable model that I'm very proud of, that so much so that many of our retiring fishermen leave their licenses in this pool for me to manage for the other fishermen that still fish for us. Plant that we operate in the north, where most of our acquiring happens, I also offload for competitors, many First Nations fishermen, and the First Nations partner that we have in the various communities. I think that over the last 2 or 3 decades in the industry, with the decline of the salmon and herring fisheries, it's sped up the consolidation and processing companies, and this is why there is some corporate concentration in these 2 like categories, especially herring and salmon. But I think there's some narrative also that exists that I've heard around our industry that all fisheries have excessive corporate concentration. And I do not believe this to be the case. And I'm happy that studies like the beneficial license ownership at least start to get some true aspect of who owns what. And I'm not going to take the position that there shouldn't be any changes to the status quo, but I would hope that while considering any change, we use good data and evidence and meaningful consultation with all of the affected parties so that any changes won't continue to harm the various participant groups in the Pacific region. But a main thing I'd like to say is the licensing system in BC has become so complicated and so interconnected. It's so much more complicated than most people think, and any changes will most certainly require lots of planning and will have significant impacts to many. I don't profess to know what the threshold for corporate concentration is, but I think if you look at some of the license categories, I don't believe there is more than 5 or 10% of corporate concentration in a lot of these fisheries. And the landscape of license ownership is changing rapidly, where the First Nations community now through PICFI is becoming one of the larger license owners in many license categories. And it's important that to realize that a lot of these First Nations groups are operating through normal legal companies and have joint ventures with companies such as myself and individual fishermen. So any changes that would be made to the licensing system would have impacts to all parties, including First Nations fisheries. So I would just be cautious about changes before we know all the impacts. And I would love to be a part of those discussions because I think I have a lot of information to offer. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, under the 5-minute mark, so everybody has been good today. We'll now go to our first round of questions. We'll first go to Mr. Small for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for taking part in this study. I'm going to ask the same question, Mr. Christensen and Ms. Strobel. What progress has been made since we had the similar study, the last similar study in 2019? What progress has the Minister made on key recommendations from that study, that report?
None.
None. How about you, Ms. Strobel?
I would say the same. No progress has been made.
So what key recommendations in that study have yet to be addressed that really need to be addressed, in your opinion?
I think the most crucial one is the one that talks about the owner-operator requirement for BC, the Made in BC solution.
So how do we, if this situation exists as you've laid out for us, if that's actually the case, and I'm just trying to be a little bit impartial here, how do we walk it backwards and turn it into something that works for coastal communities and fishing families?
I think that fleet separation is an important first step. It was the first step on the East Coast as well to separate processing licenses from fishing licenses, and so it does boggle my mind that we haven't begun with a fleet separation on the Pacific Coast. I think that would be the first step. I know that there's often the argument that you can't unscramble an egg, that this is what we have, and I agree with many who say it is very complicated, but I don't think that it being complicated is a reason not to uncover a way to create policies that create better outcomes. So I think fleet separation is a place to start, and owner operating needs to be examined as well, for sure.
So, again, Mr. Chair, okay, so for Ms. Strobel, we've basically had testimony here that said that a lot of this license ownership is untraceable, held by numbers companies and whatnot. But are you suggesting that these licenses be basically confiscated and redistributed? How would that be possible? How could we make that work?
You can look at how it's been done on the East Coast. So you could have a period, say 7 years or 10 years, for disinvestment. That would be one way of doing it. The key factor is to get this started. Things have gone, over the 30 years this has been discussed, things have just grown worse and worse. How to change that? The first thing is you need to get DFO to work on it. They don't seem to be.
So do you think there would be any ways that individuals involved in this corporate concentration would be able to skirt around new laws that are brought in? For example, with we hear talk of supply agreements. How can you be sure that the legislation would actually work for you? Because there's widespread belief in the East Coast that it hasn't really worked for them.
Yeah, I don't think that there's a really simple, clear answer here, but I think that we have learned a lot of lessons on the East Coast about supply agreements and how we need to be careful how those can take place under the existing framework on the East Coast, which is why we need a Made in BC solution that takes the best lessons that we've learned from the East Coast and applies them to do something different on the West Coast and Pacific region. I think you're going to hear testimony next week from Rick Williams, who I heard him recently speak at the Fisheries for Communities gathering about a number of proposals of how the government could even buy back licenses and not have owner at all. What would that look like? I think there's a lot of creative solutions. There's a lot of folks who've done research. They've looked at other jurisdictions, and I think it's only up to the department to do some research, to look out there at other examples, and then to come up with a solution. Not to say, well, it's too complicated, we're not going to touch it.
So, Ms. Strobel, I heard you talk about repercussions for harvesters who could have witnessed here. What type repercussions were you thinking about? Would you like to elaborate on that?
Yeah, it's uncomfortable to elaborate on repercussions that harvesters face. Our harvesters, that the 45 families that fish for Skipper Otto have experienced. But the industry is very much controlled by some big companies who control a lot of quota and a lot of licenses, offload facilities, ice plants, things of this nature, that those kinds of services can be declined to harvesters. So even if they are technically independent owner-operators, they aren't necessarily operating in an independent way. And I can give you an example if you'd like to hear how quota works in terms of independence. So I'll give you a very, very common example that fishing families may have inherited some quota from their parents. So, for example, 5,000 pounds of quota. That's not enough quota to make a living for the year. And so they have to lease some additional quota from somewhere else in order to make a living for the year. So they will go to, it's usually a company that owns quota that they need to lease from. The company will lease it to them under the condition that they sell back their fish, that 10,000 pounds, for example, at the price that the company set. But they must also sell the 5,000 pounds of quota that they own to that company in order to get that additional 10,000. So this is why I say that the beneficial ownership survey might provide some misleading evidence, because many of the independent families who do own quota aren't operating in an independent way. And it's really just smart business. I'm not finger pointing at businesses who do this. They are operating legally within the framework that's been set up by this government. And naturally, the smartest business move for them in that framework would be to own the minimum amount of quota that they need to own in order to control the rest. And so that's what we're experiencing, and the survey won't demonstrate that.
Thank you, Mr. Small. We'll now go to Mr. Hardy for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for being here. Ms. Strobel, vertical integration, you can understand it. If you're putting a lot of money into a processing facility, you obviously want to have the material coming in that you can process. So if that's not really such a bad notion, is the issue then, or the question then, the sharing of the wealth between the harvester, the processor, wholesaler, retailer, et cetera, et cetera? Is that really what's out of whack, and do we really need to put the effort into unscrambling the egg, to use that analogy, or would it be just a lot simpler just to prescribe what percentage of the total value each person gets as a share?
And I have heard examples of that where there is prescribed a maximum percent of the value of the catch that can go to a license owner. And I think that would go a long way. I know that in British Columbia, in many cases, upwards of 75% of the landed value of the catch goes to the license owner. And what remains isn't enough to have a viable fishing operation. So this is why I say that under the current system, I understand entirely that fishing is risky and that opening a plant is expensive and that the businesses on the BC coast provide a valuable service for all of us who are in the industry by opening plants and by operating offloading and providing ice and that sort of thing. It's disproportionate de-risking of those companies in order to make it viable for them at the expense of fishing families, which is the problem. And so there needs to be a more equitable distribution of the wealth.
Mr. Villy, do you have any sense as to, if there's a gap, if fishing families cannot make a living under the current regime, there's a gap there in terms of what they're able to live on. What expense to the government or governments does that gap represent? Do you have any idea of how much government is actually coming in to close the gap because the current system leaves fishers really undercompensated?
No, I can't answer that.
Ms. Drobel or Mr. Moreau? No?
I don't have figures before me, but I think it would be very interesting to find those.
And Mr. Villy, if you could just confirm, so I'm going to lease quota to somebody. They pay up front the price that I'm giving them. They're price takers, not price makers. But nobody knows what the landed value is going to be before, the person is basically committed to renting that quota. Is that correct?
That is very often the case, and there are a number of cases where fishers, after the season, have owed money to the license holder owner.
Mr. Moreau, you mentioned that you deal with about 300 independent harvesters. What makes them independent? You're on mute, sir.
What makes them independent is they own their own boat licenses. I do provide some quota to them, but I would tell you that the only people I have contracts with are people that I've loaned money to buy their vessel. And that's just, I would take a mortgage on their boat. And yes, it says that they'll sell fish to me, but I also provide them language that says they will receive the same value as I will pay to any other fisherman. I've never had a complaint. We have a very loyal fleet. And I think the leasing portion that you talk about, there's so many different deals. Fishermen make their own deals with some license holders. Some of them finance each other. Some companies pay licenses. There's no standard price, but in my case, there's never been a fisherman left owing me at the end of the season because my pool operates to spread the risk across myself, license holders, and the fishermen.
Thank you, sir. Back to you, Ms. Strobel. Do you have any sense as to the difference in income between the fishers who supply you, those 45 fishing families, versus, perhaps some of the other fishers that are working the coast?
We do get asked that question quite often. Can we give a simple answer to how much more do our fishing families get paid? But it varies by species, from species to species and year to year. But we work individually with the families to figure out actually what would a living wage be for them that year. And so what are their costs? We help them kind of figure out their costs and figure out what a living wage would be. I know that across the board we find out what the grounds price is because they may be selling part of their catch elsewhere, and so we do know that we're able to pay more consistently across the board. And so it varies from, maybe 10% to maybe 300%, anywhere in there, depending on species.
Okay, thank you for that. Mr. Villy, it's been said here a few times that the DFO's focus seems to be managing fishing effort versus managing the sustainability of fish stocks. Would you agree with that? In other words, DFO manages people, not fish.
DFO is supposed to manage people, absolutely. DFO on the West Coast has a very strong mandate about conservation and seems to have much less emphasis on the socioeconomic aspects of the fishery. So the balance is off.
All right, thank you for that. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy. We'll now go to Madame Debbie M. pour 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the witnesses. It's always great to hear from you. I'd like to turn to Ms. Strobel. Earlier, you talked about the more nuanced reality rather than just being an owner-operator on paper, but they don't need to hold the quotas to control the company. Now, if I've correctly understood, you'd said that you would add some more detail on all of this. Would you like to do that?
Thank you so much. Yes, this is the example that I provided around quota ownership. It was the example that I wanted to bring here. And so that, again, if a family owns some quota, it isn't necessarily enough for them to make a living. And so they are often scrambling to lease additional quota to make the living for that year. And that's often on the condition that they will sell the fish from their own quota to the same company for whatever price they sell. And this has happened to us at Skipperotto quite often, where someone will approach us and say, I have quota, I would like to sell my fish to you, but I can't because you don't own quota that you can lease me to make up the rest of my year. And when I lease it from another company, I have to sell my quota to that company at their price. So it takes away that independence from the fishing family. So that's one common example I wanted to share.
If I correctly understand correctly, there's two ways in which you control fisheries. First of all, there's the licenses, is having as many licenses as possible, and then become the banker, if you like, for fish harvesters so they can continue to fish. So what is going to happen with fishing activities in regions and the survival of coastal communities who depend on fishing activities? And what happens with the seafood market and the prices? Where are we heading towards with this way of doing things? Is there any hope?
It feels very depressing, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It feels very discouraging. I agree. I see fishing families like mine disappearing. My son is here today witnessing, watching as well. There's Oliver behind me. And he wants to stay fishing. He wants to stay fishing, and it's very difficult for him to stay in the industry. And we see that all up and down the coast, very hard for young people to get into fishing, to stay in their communities. Yeah, it is very discouraging. We see a lot of harvesters becoming laborers, where fishing families, harvesters are drawn to fishing because we are entrepreneurs, because we like to set up our operations, do things right, do things our way. And I see people nodding. Those come from coastal communities understand that. But when we lose control of access to the resource, we lose the ability to fight for the best price, then we are no longer entrepreneurs. We're merely laborers. And so we're losing a way of life in our fishing communities because of this.
Merci.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to turn towards another witness. I'm just finding his name. The man up on the screen. Mr. Miho. I'd like to hear from you. We've had people before the committee who wanted to testify anonymously. Could you comment on this desire? Why do you think they wanted to testify anonymously?
Mr. Moreau?
I'm sorry, the moderator must have muted me. I couldn't hear the translation either.
To ask the question
Oui,
again.
merci.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Miro, I would like to know How do you interpret the fact that certain witnesses wanted to testify recently before the committee anonymously? What do you think about that?
Okay, and the bottom of your screen, Mr. Moreau, you can select English, French, or floor. So if you would select the
I have.
English.
I've selected English, yes.
Okay, we'll try it
I have.
one more time. Madame Debian.
So once again, Mr. Miro, could you please comment on the fact that certain witnesses wanted to testify anonymously before this committee recently?
It's on English, I'm sorry, but it's coming across as French.
Okay, I'm going to check to see if the other members online.
Okay, there I have it, sorry.
Okay,
Operator error,
all
sorry.
right. Try it again, Madame Debian. Take 3.
I apologize, thanks.
Arrêtez mon temps, Monsieur le Président.
I hope that you're taking off my time, Chair. So, Mr. Miro, I'd like to have your comments, and I'd like you to comment about the fact that recently we've had witnesses that have come before the committee anonymously. What do you think about that request? Why do you think they wanted to testify anonymously?
I couldn't imagine within my company, I would invite any to come. I'm a full open book, and if some people feel they need to come and testify anonymously, then you should grant it. But from my experience, I would not have anybody in my fleet, I think, that would be afraid to speak. I invite them to be open. I'm a total open book as a company.
Merci.
Thank you. And now turning to Mr. Christensen. Small-scale harvesters have to bear the highest risk, and they also have the highest financial burden, and often they owe money to the companies that finance them. So what about the state of the economy? Is it viable in the medium term with this type of system? Is the fisheries economy viable within this type of system?
Yes, the fisheries on the West Coast have to a very large degree become in the, what's the word?
Unviable?
Yeah. Have to a very large become, sorry, I can't find the word. It's not possible for fishers on the West Coast who rely on leasing quotas to make a living. It's not possible to make enough to maintain the fisheries and to pay living wages to their crew. It is simply not possible.
Qu'adviendra-t-il de la...
So what will happen to the resources? We've been told in another committee that we need to have on-the-ground knowledge to protect resources. We've seen that with lobster. You need to turn to the lobster fishers to know how we can actually manage and protect the resources. So what will happen to the resources if we remain with the status quo? What do you think?
Can I give you one example? That's for a species that does not have quota license. On the West Coast, that's the shrimp trawl fishery, where the effort is very, very low compared to what it could be. The reason for that is that DFO, in the name of conservation, has a bycatch level of a species, Eulachon, of 4 tons, which corresponds to less than 0.01% of that important species. But DFO do not want to discuss changing that arbitrary level. So DFO, in this case, has strongly erred on the side of conservation and do not take any consideration for socioeconomic aspects in such a fishery. I think on the West Coast, DFO has really gone too far on the conservation. It's much more balanced on the East Coast.
Okay, thank you, Madam Debienne. We allowed you an extra 2 minutes there to make up for the interruption and getting the translation done. We'll now welcome Mr. McGregor to the committee in substituting for his colleague, Ms. Barron. You're up next, sir, for 6 minutes or less.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I'm used to being on the Agriculture Committee, so I'm going to try my best not to feel like a fish out of water here at the Fisheries Committee. But I'm proud to call Vancouver Island home. It's a beautiful coastline, and I am here filling in for my lovely colleague Lisa Marie Barron. And Ms. Strobel, I appreciate your opening remarks where you were outlining, and in subsequent questions where you've outlined that example. And you did state in your opening line that like many fishing families, you can't afford to purchase the licenses, so that you, like many other families, you have to afford to lease. And you gave that example of how a family may own 5,000 pounds through quota. That's not enough to support them through the year, so you have to lease an additional 5,000. And through that system, corporations can exert control over both licenses, saying we're going to buy you out at X amount. Like, can you give a sense of, what's the earnings differential? Like, has that been quantified for what fishing families are missing out on, through the leasing system versus if they had had enough money to be able to actually afford enough quota to support themselves through the year?
Yeah, I don't have quantifiable numbers. I wish I did. I wish I could have it in a chart that I could easily just show. But I can say that the fishing families that I know that persist in the fishery in multiple generations and that are able to make a living from fishing and then and do well and put their kids through university and things like that, they own their quota. And when we look at the example of 75% or more of the landed value going to the quota owner, so 25% coming back to the harvesting family, and out of that they have to pay for the boat and the license and the fuel and their operations and their crew. We're hearing from harvesters who simply don't fish. Maybe they have a quota in their family, they just don't fish it, because it would be money losing, as Mr. As Vidley just explained. So the difference is stark from families that own quota compared to those that don't. And I think this is the kind of study that I'm disappointed to find DFO not putting efforts into understanding. And so again, this is why I say that the beneficial ownership survey is barking up the wrong tree. We're not getting to the core of the question because we're not asking the right question.
Imposed for leasing, are they generally the same no matter where you go?
They vary. So some of our harvesters lease quota from their nation, and so the nation will have an agreement with them about what percent of the catch goes to them, or what dollar. Some, my husband leased from a family friend, and so they just negotiate between them because the family friend still owned a license. So, there are many different versions, but it is very common that and this is again why fleet separation is so important, because when a processor owns the license, of course, they're controlling the access to the resource and they're controlling the price that's being set. And there's a conflict there. So where if you're leasing it from a band that isn't buying the fish back, or you're leasing from another family that isn't trying to buy the fish, they're not setting the price of the fish, you still have the independence to go and sell that fish to whatever the highest bidder may be for you as a harvester. But when your quota comes from the company that owns it and you must sell back to them at that price, to me that's a conflict, and that's what the source of a lot of the problem for many fishing families is.
Thank you for adding more detail to that for the committee. You did mention that you had recently participated in the Fisheries for Communities event in Victoria, and I think you did touch on that in an earlier answer, but can you elaborate a little bit more, like describe the policy position that was the goal of the event and how much work had gone into it?
Yeah, Fisheries for Communities Network is a network of harvesters, researchers, academics, NGOs, small businesses as well, who are advocating for pardon me, policy reform in the Pacific region that would ensure that more of the value of the fishery stays in the hands of coastal communities. And so, I'm very proud of that network. This is the third time we've had a gathering and have brought folks from around Canada, but also from around the world, from other jurisdictions, who have then come and said, for example, in Alaska or in Europe, here's how policy like owner-operator and fleet separation exists in those parts of the world. I was disappointed that we didn't have a lot of attendance from DFO. While we did have attendance from members of this committee, I was very proud to see that MPs attended the full 2-day conference and listened and provided feedback. We didn't have feedback from the DFO themselves, and I was hoping that they would be there to listen to more of that, because we worked so hard to bring voices from around the world, to bring solutions, to bring different ideas.
Thank you. And just in my final 30 seconds, can you explain the difference between license holders and license owners, and why this distinction is important for the reliability of DFO's beneficial ownership survey?
Mm-hmm. There is confusion around that language in the beneficial survey because it asks for the license holder, and the license holder may be a person who is operating that lease, maybe leasing it. So license holder is not the same as license owner. And so if a large company, for example, may own a lot of licenses, they may not report that way. They may not be forced to report that way because they're not holding the license, because when someone is fishing, it's transferred to their boat, and it's transferred to their boat, then they're holding that license.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McGregor. We'll now go to Mr. Arnold for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to start out with Mr. Christensen, if I could. Mr. Christensen, you talked about the shrimp trawlers situation with the bycatch situation. Are there other impediments to small scale harvesters that are I guess, easier for the bigger operators to get around? We've heard some around observers on board. Could you provide anything on that?
Thank you, Mr. Arnold. Yes, I did mention that for the shrimp trawl fisheries in BC, there is a very low arbitrary bycatch level. Because of that low bycatch level, there's also a requirement of 100% observers in these fisheries. Only the big boats can afford that. So this is an impediment where you have a policy that really favors the large scale at the cost of the small scale fisheries. And just to illustrate how arbitrary that level is, I mentioned that the bycatch level is 0.01%, less than 0.01% of the Eulachon stock. The DFO shrimp survey has, in 12 of the last 20 years, caught more than what the entire industry is allowed to catch. 4 tons was the bycatch. They caught up to 15 tons. So this level is just without reason, without any scientific background.
Okay, thank you. You've mentioned that following the recommendations of the previous FOPO report would be a step in correcting the situation that's taking place. Would this be enough, or are there other steps that weren't covered in the earlier report?
I think this was a really important report, and if those 20 recommendations were followed, it would change the situation drastically.
Okay, thank you. I'll turn my question now to Ms. Strobel. You mentioned a term, disproportionate de-risking. I think you've spoken a little bit about that. Could you elaborate a little bit further?
Sure. I've said before that fishing is inherently risky. You know, we export most of our seafood in Canada, and so we are at the mercy of global markets. We're at the mercy of currency exchange rates. We're at the mercy of the wild ecosystem in terms of what's provided, and so it is risky. And But the current system really is designed that those who have deeper pockets are de-risked more than those who are less advantaged. And I think that's the fault of the policy. It's not the fault of those with deeper pockets. They're operating legally within the framework that's been set up by this government. But the government has established a framework that benefits those who have deeper pockets. And so I think we need to look very hard at what are the social outcomes, economic, cultural outcomes that we desire from the fishery, and then make changes that share that risk. And this is why the 2019 report was so aptly named Sharing Risks and Benefits. And I agree with Mr. Christensen that if we implemented those 20 recommendations, so we would be so much farther along, and it kind of boggles the mind that we're here still having the same conversation 5 years later.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll turn to Mr. Murrow now, if I could. Mr. Murrow, in your opening, you mentioned that there are very few processing facilities remaining on the BC coast. Why is that, and what impact is it having on the small communities and harvesters?
Lack of access to the resource or lack of resource itself. I think quite often people think there are salmon left in the ocean, but that's not entirely true. There's always years where there's massive amounts of salmon, but DFO doesn't really do proper stock assessment anymore. So we don't always get to fish the fish that's available. I'm not going to say that all the fish stocks are healthy, but lack of access, lack of fish stocks, fish plants have just left. And so, we're the only full-fledged fish left in Prince Rupert now. It's kind of tragic.
Thank you, Mr. Arnold.
It is tragic. Thank you.
You're right on the mark. We'll now go to Mr. Hanley for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, and thank you to all three witnesses for appearing. And I was late from the House of Commons, so I missed Mr. Christensen's, but catching up on the notes in between things. Mr. Christensen, maybe I'll start with you, and maybe you can help to clarify for me, and forgive me if this is some repetition, but you discussed the DFO's over concentration on conservation, and yet at the same time there is you point out that the DFO's legacy, I guess, of going for more efficiency and therefore more corporate control. So how do those two reconcile? Because to me, they don't seem quite compatible.
That's a difficult question. Because I don't see why it's not compatible. They have moved. Sorry, no, I can't see
well,
that.
Perhaps I can just ask you. Perhaps I could just ask you to clarify the comment on the DFO's over concentration on conservation, and how that has perhaps led to this situation we're in now on the West Coast.
There were big problems back in the 80s, 90s with overcapacity. DFO and that was in many parts of the world, DFO instigated policies that led to fleet reduction. And in doing that, they favored the large-scale, easy-to-manage fleets. This is one reason why we have lost the small-scale fleet on the West Coast. That fleet is easier to manage, and yes, it is more efficient, but it's being done at the cost of the communities that cannot survive. So in many fisheries, DFO's policy leads to extremely cautious approaches to management and to lower catches than could sustainably be taken from these resources.
Okay, so it's fleet reduction you're talking about, but it's inequitable fleet reduction is the net result.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. Mr. Moreau, I wanted to ask you about maybe good corporate practice. You talk about your own company. It sounds like you're very conscientious. You also make a distinction between a Canadian company that's foreign owned and presumably perhaps a foreign company that's foreign owned. But what would you say are the good corporate practices that you are demonstrating that other companies could emulate?
I view ourselves as a Canadian company. We have all Canadian management, Canadian employees. We exist in the communities, employ people in the communities where we operate our plants. I have bonus systems for all of our staff. I finance our fishermen, get them diversified across multiple fisheries. I don't make them sell their fish to us. Many of them their own dock sales and sell to other places. Pay a lot of taxes.
Appel au règlement, Monsieur le Président.
Point of order, please.
C'est difficile de.
We're being told that it's difficult for interpreters to interpret this.
Okay,
I'm speaking too quickly, am I?
move the boom.
It's a problem of sound. The sound is cutting too often for us to understand what he's saying. So maybe he could speak slower.
To make it most simply, the corporate practice that I most enjoy applying is any licenses that we have purchased, I do not do for a rate of return. I'm making investments for future fish production and what I think I get out of it by providing
On n'a pas d'interprétation.
There is no interpretation.
Is a loyal fleet. I have very little turnover.
Okay, Mr. Moreau, I got to interrupt you.
Because I help them be successful.
It's still not coming through to the interpreters to translate. So move the boom up a little higher towards between your lip and your nose. No, up. There you go. Try it now.
I apologize. I feel like an idiot. Sorry. What makes us successful, I think, and what I am the most proud of is with our license ownership is I am not doing it for a direct rate of return or to control my fishermen. I help my fishermen buy licenses, and I think what I get out of it in return is a very, very low fleet, loyal staff, loyal customers, and I don't have fishing agreements with people. I don't have any turnover of fishermen, hardly at all. Long-term fishermen, long-term staff, long-term customers. It's very simple, actually. If you just treat people fairly, they will treat you fairly back. And that's the long-term success of my company.
Mr. Henley, you're muted.
I'm sorry. I was just following up with a quick question because I don't think I have a lot of time left, but with all the interruptions, I'll indulge perhaps the committee. Mr. Moreau, would you say that your practice is the exception or the rule?
I'm not sure. You'd have to ask my fishermen, but I have a large fleet, and so we must be doing something right. I can't speak for other companies. Sorry.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hanley. We'll go to Madam Debian now for 2.5 minutes or less, please.
Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Miro, according to your explanations and your description of your company and the relations that you have with different fishers, things seem to be going well. Do you know whether there are other systems that are not going so well?
Other system meaning what? Sorry. Other fishing companies?
Well, if people are doing things in a similar way to you, but things are not going so well in their approach.
Selon vous,
do you think that there are other systems that are similar to yours but that are not going so well? What do you think?
I think there's varying degrees of success in the industry, and I think it is a very difficult industry. I will agree with Mrs. Sobel even fishermen have a difficult time, so do fish companies. It's a very difficult environment. You have to be nimble, you have to be flexible, you have to be resilient, and perhaps there may be in some years too many fishermen trying to access a limited resource, and as they will suffer. The same thing holds true with companies. That's why there's less of us. There have been too many companies, too much capacity, and it's a consolidation that I feel will continue to happen.
I'd like to turn to you, Ms. Strobel. Do you have any suggestion for the committee at the end of this hearing? And if so, what would it be? What would be your priority?
I think my priority would be fleet separation. I think if this committee would recommend to the government, to the minister, to implement a fleet separation and owner-operator provision in British Columbia, I think that this would be a very important step to sort of stemming the tide of the disappearance of harvesters and the loss of money in our coastal communities. To me, this is it's such a simple example in the East Coast in the inshore fleet, and I know you will hear testimony next week from Richard Williams, who will provide a very compelling comparative analysis between the financial benefits on the East Coast versus the West Coast. So I simply don't understand why we would not be protecting harvesters in British Columbia in the same way that we protect them on the East Coast. So I think this is very important. There are lots of other things that we can and must address, but I think we must start here if we're going to have anything left of the small-scale fleet in BC. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Debienne. We'll now go to Mr. McGregor for 2.5 minutes to end off our first hour of testimony.
Thank you very much, Chair. Dr. Christensen, you did say in your remarks, quote, the move from owner-operator to corporate dominance has been devastating for rural fishing communities, and you went on to say that communities matter. Rural coastal communities are dying throughout BC, and that notably includes First Nation communities losing livelihood and their traditional knowledge about fishing. You know, my riding of Cowichan, Malahat, Langford has got both the southwest coast and east coast of Vancouver Island. You know, that kind of a statement resonates with me because I know exactly the types of small communities that you're talking about. You yourself, you grew up in a fishing community, and I guess maybe in the final time that I have, the minute and a half that I have, can you talk a bit about what it's like when the local community itself is employed in the fishery and receives the profit, how the livelihoods of the community are supported?
It's true, I grew up in a town with 500 fishing boats in Denmark. Today there are about 30 left, and fishing is no longer an important aspect. I think it has major consequences for the whole community. I would like to refer to Alert Bay, which as a First Nation was a First Nation town that was totally dependent on fisheries. If we look back, I heard estimates for there used to be more than 10,000 years of fishing experience in that community. Today, there's about 500 years of fishing experience, which means 10, 15 people left that has experience in fishing. That's why I say the small communities are dying. The experience is being lost. And with it, a way of life.
Thank you. I'll end there, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. McGregor. We're coming up against time to shut down the first hour of testimony. I want to say a big thank you, of course, to our witnesses, Mr. Christensen, Ms. Moreau, and Ms. Strobel, of course, for sharing their knowledge with us here today. And hopefully it'll play a big part in our final report when we get to actually doing that. We're going to suspend for a few minutes now while we go to in-camera. But again, I'd like to thank the witnesses again for coming and sharing their thoughts. Suspend it.
you.